brief introduction to what the tours are about, and then we'll go on to have a sample Tate Britain National Collection, the National Gallery of the Wars collection. And what I'll do, I'll give you a taste of the pictures we look at, and more importantly, the way we talk about them, the kind of our views on them, on how we try and understand that Black presence. The first thing, though, I want people to relax their minds. What does that mean? We all know what this picture is about, even though many of you, and some of you can speak German, cannot speak German. This is the mirror, and the caption is "The True Face of Donald Trump." We all know because we've got a 21st century mindset, an eye. But we're going to be looking at paintings now, which go back 300, 400, 500 years in some cases on the tour. So a very different time. The kind of people who commissioned or the patrons for those paintings, the artists, people who painted them, and last of all, the people who viewed them, they're very different from who we are today. And they had each has different aspirations and different understandings. And those pictures would have spoken to them. And so the pictures are little time capsules. And what we're going to try and do is unpick them. And we're going to, as I say, we look at 3 galleries. And something I have to say up front, because a lot of people come on the tours and say, well, where's the Black presence? Where's the agency, power, and dynamism of Black people? Well, Black people have been here since before the English, as we well know from Peter Fryer's famous opening line to Staying Power. There were Black Africans in Britain before the English. But our national galleries don't reflect that. Why? Because the kernels of our collections are the collections of white men and their understandings and aspirations of the world. And most times they commissioned white men to do their paintings. So it's a very male-dominated, very patriarchal presence we're going into now. So if women were there, they were there for a reason. And they had a role to play in relation to how men consider themselves. And we'll touch on that. So when you look at that, if it's men first, and then it's women, then Black people are marginal. They're peripheral, literally on the edges, as we'll see in the pictures. So we see men are on the edge, and Black women even more marginalized. So it's against that back when we go in there, we have to understand the times and then pick out the Black presence. And it's there, because there's been a Black presence, we know in Britain, but across Europe for centuries. We've been there, and we're there to be found in the paintings. I like to see these tours. I like to see them we look at the Black presence in its explicit form, when you can actually see it. It's there on the screen to be seen, in the paints to be seen. And then implicit form, it's a kind of a hidden presence. And that essentially means following the money. Where did the money come from for this painting? And often we'll find that has had its origin, its roots in some form of slavery. But on our journey, and I like to see it as a journey, we go from Black people as subjects of economic capital, slaves and servants. As we go over time to today, we are creators of cultural capital. We're contributing to the culture of Britain and elsewhere. And that's reflected in the art that people of color produce. So we move from subjects to creators. But that didn't happen overnight. It was a journey, really over time. As I say, we're going to look over paintings over 500 years on the tours. For now, I wanted to look at these 2 paintings, about 400 years apart. On the left, we've got Titian. Titian, one of the 3 great artists of all time. I say he's only one of the 3 artists which have consistently been in favor, never lost popularity. Titian has been amongst them. The other 2 being, of course, Leonardo and Michelangelo. Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo Brunellati. And here we have Titian painting a scene where this is Diana and Actaeon. What's happened here? Actaeon's on a day's hunting, and he stumbles across the goddess Diana in her nymph bathing. And she's not happy with that. You don't stumble on gods, even if you're a half god like Actaeon. And Diana is annoyed, angry, some might say, because she turns him to a stag. That's another painting Titian does, and he's hunted to death by his own hounds. So here we have the Black presence on the edge of the screen here, supporting a mistress as a Black maidservant. And this is 16th century Venice. Venice was a cosmopolitan city there, which was trading with India, China, Africa, and Egypt, and North Africa, and Europe. So it would have been normal for white elites to have a black servant. So it could be that black servant could have been Titian's servant, or it could have been the model for this. And we believe the model was a courtesan, and she could well have had a black servant. We have a sense that the black servant exists because when you look at the picture quotes up, the picture, the picture, the figure, the face has a presence. It looks like a person. There's a physiognomy there that recognizes this. This is a human being that's being painted here. So here we have Titian painting a black presence because there were black people in 16th century Venice. Moving forward 400 years, we have the painting by Chrysophilia, No Woman, No Cry, painted to commemorate, commemorate is a more appropriate word, celebrate the death of Stephen Lawrence at the hands of racists and the 30-year journey it took for his mother to get justice. The justice in the Ferguson reports with 70-odd reports on recommendations, and gave us the phrase institutional racism. So this is a work that talks about an incident in our time that we can understand and recognize. And it's celebrated not just by people of color, but by the nation, because we understand the grief of Stephen Lawrence's mother, the death and the challenges she went through in order to get justice for herself and her family. And here Chris reflects the tears, the sadness of that journey, but at the same time, there is a celebration of blackness, of her blackness, and the dignity that is to be found in the nobility of that search for justice, and he captures that here in No Woman, No Cry. So there you can see a little capsule, little time capsule, the difference from 16th century Titian to 20th century Chrysophilia. We're going to start our journey here in Tate Britain. Now, my tours normally take about 2 hours, and we do about 15 to 20 paintings, depending on the conversation and the feedback, which is something I do miss on these webinars. Because I like to see them as conversations. We interact in the piece, and the conversation when I introduce Sir Henry Tate is Tate, sugar, slavery. And it's not as simple as that, because Sir Henry Tate was economically active around about 1860, the 1860s. And by that time, slavery had been abolished. The slave trade, 1807, and slavery, in the British Empire, 1833. But we know that slavery continued in the Americas, both in North America, in the southern states, and in Brazil. In America, it was 1866, the 13th Amendment. And you had Brazil, it was the 1890s, they finally abolished their slavery. So although he himself did not own any plantations, he certainly benefited. He benefited from slave sugar. Now, slavery Tate has written about this on their site. There's a letter that they had commissioned to explain Tate, but he also took the opportunity to talk about there are paintings in there which could clearly be dated, traced back to slavery. This piece here by Sir Joshua Reynolds, one of the leading portrait artists of the 18th century. And here he's painting a child, one of his favorite subjects, one of his best subjects. And it was given by Sir Charles Long. Sir Charles Long was a trustee of the National Gallery and the British Museum, a man at the heart of British cultural life. But his family were slave owners. They benefited from the slavery compensation database. That was the 20 million pounds that were given to the slave owners when the slave trade was abolished. So Sir Charles, the roots of his family's wealth is slavery. The source for the money for this painting came from slavery, and we can see these paintings on the walls of the paintings in Tate Britain. So that's a direct connection. Whereas with Sir Henry, it's a bit more oblique, but nonetheless, he did benefit from it. We're going to have a look at this work. This work. This is Ira Aldridge, the American actor, and it's called "Head of a Man?" ? Ira Aldridge. And we're going to look at that question mark. Is it Ira Aldridge? Well, we know Simpson did this piece, and we know Ira Aldridge sat for this piece, The Captive Slave. because Simpson was an abolitionist or believed in the abolition of slavery, and he did this painting to show his protestations. Now, if we compare the two, the one on the left, the Tate piece is believed to be a study, and is exhibited as a study for the larger piece. And then I'm showing them in approximately round about the same, in the same proportion size. So you can see this, the captive slave, the finished work is a much bigger piece. So that piece, the Tate piece was we believe is a study for the bigger work. And over the years, it's been given a number of names. Head of a slave when it was first, head of a black when it was first exhibited, then the Negro, then head of a Negro, male head study, the captive slave. That's a bit of a mouthful. And then finally, what we have today, head of a man. Now, we know it's Ira Aldridge, but the question mark remains because the artist didn't say it. So the name of the work is, we could say, is contested. And I'm going to do a little poll now to see how you feel about it. Let me just pull the poll up just a second. Let me get the poll up on that. I'm going to launch the poll now. They've launched it. And the poll, we asked the question, which one of these titles best describes Simpson's work of art? Is it Head of a Man? Question mark, Ira Aldridge. Oh, it's current for me. Is it Head of a Black Man? Question mark, Ira Aldridge. Or is it a possible portrait of Ira Aldridge? Or finally, what about character study of an enslaved person? Or maybe none of the above. So I'd like you to see if you can poll now. Now, again, not all of you can see this. This is a frustration I have with the system, that sometimes people can't see the poll because it's on another screen. So I'd ask you to have a look around, see if you can see the score, and vote now. If you could vote now, that would be excellent. I'll give you a few moments to vote. Okay, well, this hasn't happened before. Oh, there's one person. We've had not everyone can see this, which is really frustrating on my part. But some people say none of the above. Interestingly, those who did vote none of the above, perhaps you could suggest the name, because let me just end that poll now. If we come back and we have a look at these pieces. These are works by artists who did want Ira Aldridge recognized, because it celebrated them as artists, but also him as an actor. So artist to artist, so to speak. The artist painter and the artist actor. See here, Mulready says that Ira Aldridge possibly in the role of Othello. Then we have Northcott again saying it's Ira Aldridge, and finally Briggs in Ira Aldridge's role. Now, there's an argument that says, well, maybe he didn't want to be recognized with, he wanted to associate with slavery. So he didn't want his name associated with the Simpson piece. But he was an abolitionist. At the end of every performance, he would speak out against the horrors of slavery and what a dreadful thing it was that British maintained slavery. So he was clearly an abolitionist. So maybe Simpson thought it wasn't right to have him associated with that painting, or maybe Aldridge didn't want to be. Well, we don't know, but we do know that Ira Aldridge was celebrated in painting by artists. Just before we leave today, I want to share this piece with you. This is a piece from the National Gallery. And this is one of the beauties of doing this online. I can move freely from gallery to gallery, and even show you pieces like this, which are not on display at the National Gallery. In fact, it's on permanent loan to Ireland and the Irish National Gallery in Dublin. What we're looking at here is what I think is an exceptional piece. Apart from being a very beautiful object, what's going on here is that it's exceptional to me because we don't know who the artist is. Now, normally when artists paint women of color, they call them, in this period, they were called the Negress, the mulatto, the black. And it's the artists we know and is celebrated, and the model is marginal. But here, we don't know either. And it's a work of great quality, and some quality, but we don't know who the artist is. As I say, this is truly, truly exceptional. So, and it was at the turn of the century, turn of the 19th century, it was called the Slave Woman. That's really bizarre because this is a late 19th century piece, and slavery had been abolished in most parts of the world, yet they still consider it a slave. The name is now currently a black woman, but I'd even go further. Why black woman? Why not just a woman? But there it is. I present that as a discussion point in terms of we compare the Ira Aldridge head of man, and we know his name. Here, this anonymized painting of a woman who we don't know. Yeah, beautiful painting. We discussed this in more detail when I do the National Gallery talks. It's quite a significant piece to the discussion about the black female figure. But returning to Ira Aldridge, he was a celebrated character in his day. He was known as the African Rhesus. He was celebrated in England. The Rhesus was a Roman actor, and a Roman actor was who was celebrated as one of the leading actors of his day. So here's Ira Aldridge being referenced or compared with a classical Roman actor. I think it's a great accolade. In fact, there's a blue plaque for him in London, which references his acting ability, or how his acting abilities were considered. He was also the manager of Coventry Cathedral. I would say Coventry Cathedral, Coventry Theatre. The Coventry Theatre was the actor manager there, and that's celebrated by a plaque on the building. He was celebrated not just in Britain but across Europe. Here we have just the billboards from Germany and the Czech Republic. He travelled in Russia, and sadly, on a tour of Poland, he died. And here is his tomb, and the tomb is maintained by the Polish community to this day. So there we have a black American actor, an ex-slave who came over. No, he wasn't an ex-slave. He was a free man who left New York, America, to come over here to be an actor, and became a very successful actor, and sadly died in Poland in 1857. And there's his tomb. So that's an example of the Tate. Moving on now to the National Gallery there in London, and the nucleus of the collection, the National Gallery collection, is this man's collection. Sir John Julius Angerstein, one of the wealthiest, most successful men of his day. He founded Lloyd's, and he was a man who dined with Nelson, who knew the Prince of Wales. So as my German friends would say, he's a man at the top of his bent. And as I say, his collection is the nucleus of it. And his collection, his money came from slavery. Why do I say that? Well, there was two roots to it. First, he founded Lloyd's, and that came from the coffee shops of London where they funded the slave trade, the triangular trade. The triangular trade would take up to 6 to 18 months to complete. So when a ship left the ports, Liverpool, London, or Bristol, it may not back for another 6 months. Hence the expression, when my boat comes in, because there was returns, some 10, 15, 20% people were making on their investment. And Sir John Julius was involved in the instruments to help fund the slave trade. He was also an investor in the Caribbean, because he had plenty. He owned shares in plantations in the Caribbean. So he was a man deeply rooted in the slave trade, and his wealth came from them. That collection he had that was bought for the nation was 38 works, sold for £58,000. The major work in this was a piece by two great artists of the Renaissance, Sebastian Piombo and Michelangelo Buonarroti. This piece, The Raising of Lazarus, it's a huge piece, and it's given the accession number. The accession number is the name given to each piece as it comes into the National Gallery's collection. Here's NG1. It's the first piece. It's the number one piece in the collection. And it's given that number, I believe, because in its day, it was the most expensive painting in the world. The Louvre wanted to buy it. They wanted to pay £10,000 for it, but the national, it was given to the national for a snip at £8,000. So it stayed in Britain. So there we have the kernel of the National's collection is rooted in slavery. So we're going to go inside and have a look at this piece. This is by Veronese, Paolo Veronese, one of the great artists of the Renaissance, one of my favorites. This is the adoration of the kings. They come to pay homage to the baby Jesus. And there's two black presences here. There's a little black boy here, and on the edge, you've got the black king with his assistant. The little black boy, very similar to the maidservant to Dana and Titian. He's supporting these rich elites here. These are kings. These are kings, and Veronese paints them as you would expect rich Venetians to be kings, because he was a Venetian, and you have some sense of rich Venetian. Let me show you an example here. These are the Vendramin brothers by Titian. So you can see the ermine-lined gowns, and very much like what our kings are wearing here. And they would have a black servant, just as Diana had a black servant. So these kings had a black servant. And if we look at the Black King, and this is a really extraordinary figure, because no Black King visited Europe during this period. So this is a fictitious figure, made up, fabricated from the artist's imagination, courtly practice, Bible study. And here we have the black figure on the edge of the painting, on the edge, kind of almost leaving it. And we'll come back to that being part of the painting in a few moments. But he's not quite part of the picture. He's always dressed differently, often more flamboyantly, and he's always got that earring. Now, I argue, some of the historians agree with me, that that's a reference to his Africanness, because they believed Africans were naked but wore much gold. So here we have a reference to his Africanness. And I've looked at many hundreds, thousands now, many hundreds of adorations here, and I've never seen the Black King, the White King with an earring. We move on. Let me show you another piece. This is a northern artist, and we can see a very similar composition. Let's go a little bit closer to it. There we've got 2 and 1. There's 2 white kings and 1 black king. And the black king is on the edge, who is apart. He's separate from the other 2. Perhaps here the artist Gossard has not painted them as dramatically different, but physically is separated from the other 2 artists. And Gossard uses him as a signpost. Here, round under his hat, or rather, should I say, his crown, there's a sign saying, "I Gossard made that." He clearly has his earring on there, and he's got on the shawl, or the cloth he's using to hold his present, there's a hymn to Mary, and his attendants, his black attendant there, has a sign saying Gossard made this. So we don't know if it's a pejorative. He's using them in a pejorative sense, marking up the black person, but it just marks them out as difference. So if we look at this work, and then we go a little bit closer. This is by Van Brugge. This is another adoration scene. Here we've got the 2 kings clearly very right in front of the baby Jesus, but the black king is some distance away, and it's not even clear that he's part of the scene. He's part of it, and we've got physically this barrier between him and the baby Jesus. So here they're apart, and some people argue this is not racism, but it's more like racialism, looking at difference in race and separating them and creating the other, not one of us. That difference, apart and apart. So it's the othering of the black presence, and not in a pejorative way, but not just kind of saying, well, keep it as you're not quite one of us. You're not part of the family yet. We discussed that black person in a little more detail, in fact, a lot more detail on the course, because there are other implications to the black presence. I want to give you a flavour. Okay, so we've looked at kings. Where are the queens? For that, we have to have a look at this piece. Now, I always have a bit of fun with this piece in the sense that it's called The Embarkation of the Queen of Sheba by Claude Lorraine, 17th century artist. One of the great artists of the day. He captured light, he captured the weather, the water, the clouds. So he's not painting Queen of Sheba here. He's painting a seascape. And to find the Queen of Sheba, that's all we're doing, a bit of fun finding it. And she's there in the corner. And there she is. And we know she's the queen because she's got the crown on, but she's got 2 black attendants. Now, it's said that the black king came from Saba or Sheba. And so we would expect the Queen of Sheba to be black. But here she's white with two black attendants. What's going on there? Well, the Queen of Sheba was black at one time. We didn't consider back. Here we see her here. This is the Queen of Sheba in front of Solomon with two attendants, which when you look at them close up, you can see they are black. They are black or of African appearance. So here we have a black Queen of Sheba. You can see there, Regina Asaba. She comes from the same place as the Black King, but she never made it out as an iconic image like the Black King. So why is that? Well, we believe she got conflated with with what happened to Solomon, or what was said about Solomon and his wives, because it talks about Solomon. The Bible talks about Solomon's wives turned his head. Solomon's wives turned his head. So here we have the Black Queen getting Solomon to worship idols. And the Bible is a patriarchal document. So you refer at the very beginning, it was Eve's fault because she gave the apple to Adam. And there's Samson, Delilah. Delilah was deceived by Samson was deceived by Delilah. Joanna and Holofernes. Holofernes was deceived by Joanna. There's many women in the Bible, many strong women were shown to deceive men, to bring them down in some way. And what we're seeing here is this Queen of Sheba is getting tarnished with that brush. And it goes even further. Look at this. The Queen of Sheba. This is a 50s painting, 50s film of a sensuous beauty, barbaric splendor. And this was a queen that came to ask a king questions to seek out knowledge and understanding. And she gets reduced to this sex symbol. And what we're seeing here is the dual whammy of the misogyny, the sexism here, in terms of the role of women, but also the racism in the fact that the denial of the black woman's presence, the Black Queen's presence. And the word we use now is misogynoir. This is misogyny in action. You said the Queen of Sheba is not a celebrated image as the Black King is. And the Black King is celebrated to this day, 6th of January, across Europe, Poland, southern Germany, Italy, Spain. They commemorate him. But the Queen of Sheba, no, she's not an appropriate role model. And we discussed that a lot further, because when this is a revelation to me, is the fact that we have paintings in our galleries which talk about rape, which are named like the rape of Europa. That's on display right now. Okay, you can't see it because the exhibition's not on because we're closed. But today, would we call a painting or name a painting rape? But they had one there in this time. So there's a very different attitude towards women. And we discussed that, the role of women, and more specifically, the role of Black women against that background. Okay, moving on from the National Gallery, I want to finish off with the Wallace Collection. The Wallace Collection is the work of 3 generations of Englishmen, of white Englishmen. And for me, it's a very special place because you see him work in its original place. It's a house, and it's a country home, but it's in central London, and it's sumptuously decorated because all the objects that were bought for the paintings, the porcelain, the furniture was of the highest quality, the highest provenance, owned by kings, queens, dukes, duchesses, and done by the great artists of the day. The paintings there's Titians, there's Murillos, the Rubens, they're all there. It's just exquisite. What was it? The Israeli call it? A palace of delights. It's beautiful. And if we're going to look at one space, the Grand Gallery. Now, those of you who had the pleasure of going to the Louvre have some sense of the Louvre. This is almost like a mini Louvre in terms of the quality of the work that's on display. It's equal to the Louvre. In terms of there's Titians there, there's a Rubens there, Murillo, as I say, Velasquez. It's all him. We're going to look at the piece down the other end of the gallery here. This piece here. This is Velasquez, Woman with a Fan. Woman with a Fan. And Velasquez was one of the great portrait painters of our time. Not of our time, I'll just say of all time. This is the 17th century. He was called in 1650 to Rome to paint the Pope. Now, 1650 was a very special year. It was a jubilee year. When he was there, he painted this picture as well. He painted this picture of his slave. And he freed his slave that year because it was a jubilee year. And this is Juan de Breca. Now we know it's Juan de Breca because he names him, and he celebrates him here because although Spain had a population of blacks, we believe around 2 million, there are very, very, very few actually portrayed. And to portray them as a man of substance, an elite, as he's painted here with that beautiful silk collar and that stance, that firm, positive stance, that man who has a right to be here, a man of some circumstance. This is a wholly exceptional painting. And you would see when you compare it to the Pope, they are equals in terms of the way Velasquez has caught them with a portrait, that magical portrait. These pictures are looking at you just as much as you look at them. There's a kind of a presence of their own. And Juan de Breca, he, as I say, he manumitted to make him feel like you. And he was very close to him. They were very close. They worked very close together. And he would his job as a slave or as a assistant would be to mix paints and generally look after the studio. But there are 5 versions of that painting, this painting by Juan de Breca. We believe that at least one of them was done by Juan, such was his talent as an artist. And we get a sense of it here in this piece. This is by Juan de Breca. We know it's by him because he says so in a little piece of paper there. And he gives us a portrait on the edge of the painting. And this painting speaks of the black peasants in Spain in the 17th century, which was a challenging time because there were no black people not shown in portraiture. And this picture speaks to that. And we discussed that in detail, or in much further when we actually do the tour. But I used to think that Juan was the first artist of color, but Murillo had an assistant who was like Juan de Breca, mixed his paints and ran the gallery, ran the studio for him. But he discovered him famously painting, completing a painting. And he completes some of the students' painting, he completes some of his master's painting, and he didn't know who did it. He did this secretly. And he was known as the zombie painter, the phantom painter. And this story has been written, is drawn up a couple of times here. Different artists have interpreted where Gomez, Murillo is surprised as he finds that the secret painter is his own servant, his own slave, Sebastian Gomez. It's even celebrated in a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, but it's no fairy tale. Sebastian Gomez really existed. And here's an example of his work. Now, perhaps you could argue he's not as good as his master. His master's much better. But nevertheless, he was competent, he was celebrated in his day. So here was me thinking that Juan Breca was the first. But no, we've got Sebastian Gomez. They would have been contemporaries. Perhaps maybe they knew each other. We don't know. The work is that to be done on that. But when you consider there were 2 million, as I say, black people working there, and there were many artists there, some would be assistants to artists. So maybe there are other artists of color, and maybe a female artist of color, the first female artist of color who's there in Spain. We don't know, but there's a good chance it could be there. She could be. She's there to be discovered. Okay, we've had our trip through 3 galleries, and we sampled the collections of 3 men, of 2 men and a generation of men in the Wallace collection. We've looked at 3 paintings. As I say, normally my tours are 15 to 20 paintings. They last over 2 hours. And we've had a sample of what we do and how we interact. This is meant to, and here comes the advert, this is meant to entice you to come on one of my 1-hour webinars, $7.50 if you book early, or £10 standard fee, that includes the booking fee. You book online through Eventbrite, and we go into more detail, and we look at the paintings that are on display, and I try and share with you some of my understanding, and we have a conversation about the work. So look, I want to say I very much enjoyed this. Bye-bye for now.